Tyler Webb, welcome to the Sport Profile.
Thanks, Dylan.
I'm super excited for this, dude. I've followed you for a long time, so huge fan of your work in the sports business space. And, something I ask a lot of folks who are into sports business is, and you've talked about this as well, is just how niche of a space it is. So what about the business of sports really resonates with you most?
Well, there's probably a deeper psychological answer in there about how I was just never very good at sports. And so the parts that I always resonated with were the parts that happened off the field.
Yeah.
But if I were to think from a commercial perspective, like why there's so much commercial interest in sports business, why I've been able to create an audience like I have, I think there is something, I describe it like you find a little thread, like if you ever find a thread in your shirt and you start to pull it, and then you have that experience where the thread just keeps coming and you're slowly just unraveling your shirt.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that in sports business where we're looking at the same shirt that have these little threads poked out, and it's my job to pull on that thread and see how much thread comes with it. And the analogy falls apart, but the idea is that the more thread that comes out, the more interesting that story might be. And I really just think, Dylan, that there's a lot that we look at on our screens. I think sports are one of the last monocultural experiences we have as a society. The NFL specifically, I think is.
I'd say so. I agree.
Yeah,
with
right.
that.
There's I think even if you break down sports, like if I were to talk to you in the middle of the summer and I say, hey, you catch the game last night, you were going to have no idea what I'm talking about. Now, in the NFL, it's a little different. If I talk to you on a Monday morning and I say, hey, did you catch the game last night? You probably have an idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
but in any
you
case,
know what's happening.
Right. In any case, sports are sort of that last monocultural frontier that we have. And so I think it's really interesting that we're all looking at the same screen, we're all watching the same type of broadcast, but there are little pieces in there that you might not know a lot about. And I find it to be my job to pull out the things that you're looking at on a regular basis and you recognize, you know that you recognize these things, but when I ask the question or when I present the hook at the beginning of the video, you slowly start to realize you have no idea what you've been looking at, or you don't know anything about the thing that you've been looking at. And so I get a lot of, I drive a lot of enjoyment from pulling on that thread for people and watching all the stuff that tumbles out.
You like picking on the things that people don't know.
Yeah, it's like you see it, but you don't understand it, is how I like to describe it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, perfect example is like how we were talking before about the groundskeeping video. Not many people know about that. And I'm curious, that's kind of, leads me to another question as well, is like your inspiration for these videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, like you kind of pick on that thread that people don't know about. How obscure do you like to go?
I like to follow my own curiosity. I really do think that there would be there's like a disingenuous factor that might come through if I wasn't actually curious in it. So truthfully, Dylan, a lot of it comes through me sitting on the couch and watching football on Sundays right now in the fall and just asking myself the stupid question is what I refer to it as. Like what's sort of the dumbest question I can ask, or maybe it's just the most obvious thing I can ask, and how much is there to dig into? So when I just wrote this script recently, it'll be out by the time this podcast is out, but I always see those guys on the sideline of NFL games with those big glass domes, and I know they're microphones, and I know their idea is to capture audio, and you really only see these guys when players run into them and they have this spectacular tumble because they're holding these big glass domes in their hand. But the question I found myself asking is, well, what do they do, and why is the microphone that they're holding look like that? What is their purpose on the sideline? What is the idea or the science behind that device? And so I dug into it, and I found that these parabolic microphones that the NFL, or that the broadcasts rather, use are all created by hand in Janesville, Wisconsin, by this guy.
Really?
That owns this small company, and the science behind the parabolic microphones are really cool and actually really impressive. Like their ability to pick up really precise sounds from across a football field is really impressive. And there's something there, right? Like there's some interest there in the thing that we see, but we don't understand.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that a lot because it shows like, you're a naturally curious person. So outside of sports then, what are some kind of areas that get you curious and get your mind going?
I'm really into local politics, or I'm a bit of a political junkie. Like a lot of the podcasts I listen to, if they're not sports related, they're probably politically related in some way.
Yeah.
I'm just like urban planning and public transportation curious. I'm by no means an expert in any of those areas, but like I see that the impact that local politics, the impact that urban planning, public transportation can have in the place that I live. And, I think like everybody should be, I'm passionate about making the place that I live better to live in for me and other
Totally.
people around me. So like, those are just kind of selfishly the places that I find myself most interested in. Like I have a subscription to the local newspaper that I read every morning. And that's kind of how I spend my time. And honestly, I think to your point about curiosity, like I think the fact that those things impact me mean that when I read a story, like a local sports story, or even like I was reading a story I did recently. I live in Minneapolis. And so
Yeah.
I was reading some story about how much the public transportation is used to get to and from the stadium. And so that inherently isn't a sports story, but selfishly, that was something like I take public transportation to games when I go. And so I was just curious about how many people use it. And that got me asking questions about, well, how did they design this in the first place? Because the public transportation hasn't always been here. And it led me down the rabbit hole of how other stadiums are designed for, or maybe not for, public transportation. And I kind of stumbled backwards into this really interesting video that ended up being applicable to a lot of people, or people could, a lot of different people could have opinions on it, even though very narrowly, if you're just to read the script, the video is about public transportation at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so
Right.
I just let my curiosity lead me. And like I said, I do think that shows through in the video, but selfishly, it just kind of comes back to things that I feel like impact my day-to-day life. And I try to extrapolate them and make them as widely applicable to people if I decide to make a video about it.
Have you always been that way? Like even from like a young age, like have you always been like that naturally kind of curious individual?
Well, I hate to admit it, but I was definitely like the devil advocate kid in high school. Like not to play devil's advocate. Like I probably had a really nasally voice and was really annoying. I always felt I think I always found it interesting to like to play contrarian. And I don't think at the time, like when I think about myself back in middle school or high school, it was for any reason other than to just like
Tyler Webb, 8th grade contrarian.
Yeah, evoke a reaction on people. Like it's really embarrassing to admit now. Like it's not something I'm necessarily proud of, but I do think that once you channel that contrarian nature in the right way, and you don't just do it in a way that is meant to provoke people, but you actually do it in a way that's meant to like be authentically curious. I think that's probably where that comes from.
Yeah, I think I share that a bit, with you because, especially when it comes to sports business. I mean, like I don't have a business degree, I was always just like naturally kind of curious about how those things came together, or how partnerships come together, or, negotiations with, investment. And I think I like poking fun at it a little bit just because it is so complex.
Sure.
Because these people are dealing with more money than like I'll ever see in my lifetime. And it's just like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and the Packers are obviously a huge deal there.
Right.
I grew up as a Catholic in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so the most important thing on Sunday was going to church. And the second most important thing, not by a wide margin, was watching the Green Bay Packers. I mean, I remember having a priest, most Catholic masses last about 60 minutes. And this priest
usually ends at 12. I'm Jewish. I don't really know.
So
like usually ends at 12.
So we'd go to like a 10 a.m. mass.
Okay.
And traditionally, I would say in the off season, it would end at 11 a.m. Central Time.
Sure.
But this priest was a season ticket holder, so he had to make sure the mass ended at 10:45. So he had enough time to get across town to get to the tailgate that he was going to before the Packers. That's
priorities.
That's how important it was, right? Like it's church 1, and then 1B was making sure that you got to the Packer game. And so I think really early on, I had this understanding that sports were important to people across a broad spectrum. Like as a kid that grew up Catholic, like we can get into, I don't know, we don't have to get into religion here, but like the humanizing factor that having your priest want to get to the Green Bay Packer game had on a young child, I think was probably more impactful than I could have ever realized, because it was like it just meant everybody was so obsessed with sports. And so I think I was probably always asking this question of like, why are people so obsessed with sports? And again, for me, it wasn't like me channeling that energy was never going to happen on the field. I was just not athletically inclined enough for me to participate in sports in a
What'd you
meaningful way
play?
on the field. I was a baseball player and not a particularly good one. And so
Me neither.
and so I think where that curiosity and that attempt to understand like why sports were so important was then channeled to trying to understand the dynamics of what it meant to people off the field. And I think sports business sort of captures that in an interesting way. Again, it just goes back to having the ability to ask those questions about why it matters, and to your point, like why these things are valued so high when in reality they're just games. And I think for me that just goes all the way back to seeing how much it meant to people from where I was.
I read that you, growing up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, that you were kind of feeling a little stuck there. You kind of felt that you were kind of curious, like what's going beyond the pastures, I think was something that you said. Take me inside that mindset a little bit. Like when were you kind of feeling that, and how did you kind of, get past it, now living in Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, I do consider myself lucky from the standpoint of really early on in high school, I was introduced to a guy named Frank Kugel. And Frank had a Twitter account called I Live for Football that he started and obviously named when he was about 14 years old as a aspirational high school football player. He lived for football. When I stumbled across that account on Twitter, it had about 10,000 followers. And being from Green Bay, Wisconsin, I thought that was the coolest thing. Even like that was probably in 2014. So like it was at the very beginning of a lot of these social platforms, and certainly at the beginning of like what it meant to be a content creator. Like I think still at the time, to me, a content creator meant like you were a YouTuber. And when I watched people on YouTube, they all lived in Los Angeles, California. And so I kind of thought like
that probably was my perception too in 2014. Yeah.
And so my assumption was in order to be a content creator, especially a successful one, that you had to live in Los Angeles, California. And I remember watching these Minecraft YouTubers and do their house tours. They had like these crazy houses. And I just lived in a very normal suburban house in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so the fact that there was this kid that was around my age that had this Twitter account that had 10,000 followers in Green Bay, Wisconsin was mind-blowing to me, because I didn't think that creating an audience like that could be something that happened where I was from. And so to the point of like, I don't think I was ever going to end up in Green Bay. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but I think I've ended up where I was meant to end up. But certainly at the time, I couldn't believe how cool it was that he was doing that from where I was from. Yeah. And I was just drawn to that. I think I was just drawn to like the possibility of what that could be. I'm like, I definitely think a lot of that mindset could be attributed to me just growing up on YouTube. Like I loved YouTube as a kid. I loved watching, again, like a lot of it was Minecraft, but just like very like YouTube 1.0, like the just scrolling what the trending videos were. And like that was all really cool and really aspirational to me.
Yeah.
And I even remember we had like a laptop as a family. Like I think my parents probably got rid of whatever desktop computer was in our house, and they got a laptop, this big bulky thing with a webcam. And I remember making my two younger brothers come into the basement and put on old Halloween costumes and make videos that we'd film directly into the webcam, because that was the only way I knew how to get videos onto a computer. And then that way I could take those videos and go into Windows Movie Maker and
and edit them. God.
And then post them on YouTube. Yeah, and then post them on YouTube, because that was the thing that I aspired to do. And of course, none of those videos got any traction. And maybe some part of my younger self thought, well, it's just because I don't live in Los Angeles, California. But the second I saw what Frank Kugel was doing on Twitter, and the fact that he was able to build an audience in Green Bay, Wisconsin, it just all opened up for me. And so
really,
the reason I consider myself lucky is because while maybe I had those beliefs early on that like I couldn't do this internet thing, whatever I thought it meant at the time, from Green Bay, Wisconsin, I think Frank was my first indicator that, well, actually the internet's a really big place and it can reach anywhere in the world. And so it is really possible to do it from wherever you are. And so, I ended up graduating high school in Green Bay and came here to Minneapolis, Minnesota for college. And that was my first time getting outside of my Green Bay, Wisconsin bubble in any meaningful way. I mean, I don't have to tell you much about the demographic makeup of Green Bay, Wisconsin, beyond the fact that, I don't know, I grew up as a Catholic in the suburbs as a Packers fan. Like, picture what you think that looks like, and that's exactly what it's like. And so coming to Minnesota is like my first time outside, Minneapolis specifically is my first time outside of that bubble, which I think is true for a lot of people that go to college.
Sure.
And I start to meet people here, and, Minneapolis is by no means like a Los Angeles, California in terms of the creative scene. But the fact that I went from knowing one person that was doing something that I aspired to knowing 10 people, like that was incredible to me. And then as I started to meet people and I started to try things on my own, I realized, again, like the internet's a really big place and you could reach a lot of people. And now, honestly, I take a lot of pride in living in a place that I love and being around people that I love to be around and having the career that I have. Like I take a lot of pride in the fact that I've been able to build this career from a place I like to be. And not that it would
Yeah.
be, not that I would be a sellout if I moved to a coast or I moved to a different city, but like it's great that I can build this life and do it on my own terms.
Oh, for sure. I feel I resonate a lot with that because I've grown up in Metuchen, New Jersey, small 2 by 2 mile town. And, you know, the only really exposure I've gotten to living outside of here and the state of New Jersey was when I went to Maryland for grad school for like a year and a half, 2 years, basically. And it flew by like that. And yeah, I really resonate with that. I think there's a really strong sense of like attachment to like an area. And I have that here. And, it definitely seems like you do with, Minneapolis and obviously Green Bay. And I'm curious as well, because you mentioned, how Frank inspired you for content creation. What are the biggest misconceptions about that? Because I feel like people see a follower count and they'll like automatically assume like, oh my God, they're a content creator, or oh my God, I'm trying to go viral like him. What are the biggest misconceptions that you've experienced?
I mean, I think the how quickly it can happen
Yeah.
was something that and I mean, you could like today more than ever, somebody can post a video on TikTok and go viral overnight, but you're not a content creator after one viral video. I ran that Twitter account in high school for, I mean, I probably started around my sophomore year and ended around my freshman year of college. So I don't
Yeah.
know, call it 4 to 5 years. And we probably never made more than a couple $1,000s over the course of that entire time frame. And we were working on that for 5 years, and
Right.
it grew to 150,000 followers. And I think my notion of what it meant to go viral and it meant to have success in the very early days of the internet, it was like chasing vanity metrics. And then you look back at what you accomplish over 5 years and you're like, ostensibly nothing. Like, we didn't grow a meaningful brand that we could transition anywhere. We didn't make money that was significant in any way. And so like today, still people see this ability to go viral and reach millions of people overnight. Like,
Mm-hmm.
an objective fact that you could do that overnight.
It is.
But doing that in an instant doesn't mean that you're a content creator. And I think
Right.
the act of being a content creator actually happens over long, sustained efforts of doing really the same thing over and over and over again in order to build a brand. Because while these platforms now allow us to go viral in an instant, I think it's actually harder than ever to create a brand that is lasting and impactful.
Sure.
Just because like how I show up to most people. So like creating short form content is my main creative output right now. And somebody could follow me, but they might only see one video of mine a week. And I'm posting a video a day and they only see one
Right.
video of mine a week. And so that means their exposure to me over the course of a year is actually like far less than what my actual output is. And that's because every day I'm competing to re-earn their attention, because most people that see me are not consuming me in a way that they've opted into, which means that even though they follow me, they're probably consuming content through a feed that is recommendation based, which means I have to
Yeah.
re-earn and recompete for their attention with everybody else that the algorithm is recommending to them that day. And it is frustrating as a content creator because, I mean, we've always known that like our followers are on rented land. Like I can't take my Instagram followers and transition them over to a platform. It's not like some list I can download and then retranslate over to a different platform.
Right.
But it's become even harder now. The fact that these people that have even opted into following me are not consuming my content largely in a feed where that is chronologically based and it's based through people that they've chosen to follow. And so I think while you could have a viral video, or you could have a couple viral videos, really the act of content creation or doing it successfully is a long, methodical process that requires a lot of consistency and a lot of intention.
Yeah. I've seen that intention with you too. I mean, you've started a marketing agency called Uncle Charlie, and I really, really admire the work that you do and able to, actualize that potential. So the question I have is, who is Uncle Charlie?
uh, the actual caricature of Uncle Charlie is a mustached man that's dressed like a 1930s baseball player.
I have an image in my head.
Sure, sure. The real answer is an Uncle Charlie is sort of a old colloquial term for a curveball in baseball.
Huh.
I believe it's actually it might still be Adam Wainwright's social profiles. He's sort of like one of those throwback curveball, off-speed guys from MLB times past. But and Uncle Charlie is a curveball. We actually looked up the story because we knew it was the term, but we didn't know the story behind it. And
No way.
The story is basically there was
This is the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, so when baseball was first invented, it was sort of considered non-gentlemanly to throw anything other than a fastball. The idea was like, if you can't get somebody out by throwing your hardest, you were tricking or shorting the game in some way. And there was one guy, I think he was some Ivy League president or Ivy League coach, that particularly hated any sort of off-speed pitch or any sort of junk pitch. And so they named, his name was Charlie, and so they started calling the curveball after him in a way to sort of mock his disdain for any pitch that wasn't a fastball, and that was the origin of Uncle Charlie. But as a marketing agency, specifically a sports marketing agency, we felt that the personification was fun, and then two, there's maybe some fun wordplay about a curveball in your marketing. I don't know, there was something there. We haven't leaned into it as much as we should, but we do get a lot of compliments on the name, so I'll take it.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I feel like when people hear it, this is my original thought. It's like, oh, it's somebody you guys knew, or somebody in a family, something like that. So there's no connection there.
Yeah, no, there is no connection. The closest I've been able to, or the best explanation I've been able to give is, we're in a service-based business, and so it's important to have. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on are the relationships we build with our clients, and so it's fun to have a name be the business. Like, it's almost like if you go and tell somebody you're working with Uncle Charlie, it might evoke that you're working with a individual or specific person. To me, it feels a bit more personal than having a meaningless name, large, like corporate sounding name. It just feels more personal, which is the business we're in.
Dude, I hate corporate terms. Don't even get me started.
Yeah.
That's a whole other episode. But in that, you met your good friend Jake, and I'm curious how he has impacted you, both professionally and personally.
Well, I've actually been thinking a lot about this recently. I don't know why it's just come up that I've gotten to reflect about my relationship with Jake. But I mean, aside from my wife, he's certainly the person I talk with the most, which it was something I was prepared for or warned about, rather. But I don't think it was anything I could have ever fully prepared for.
Warned about? Who was warning you about this?
Maybe less warned. So I'll give you the story. So when I graduated school in 2020, horrible time to graduate. I was freelancing. I was a freelance social media manager. Yeah. I met Jake on a couple of projects. We both went to the University of Minnesota together, and we just worked really well together. There's a lot of stuff that I hated about being in a service bit. Like, I hated about being a freelancer. Like, I didn't love having my phone ring at any hour of the day, expected to solve somebody's problem. Like, I didn't love invoicing. I didn't love, having my nose deep in spreadsheets or planning documents. Like, those were things, like, I wanted to be creative. That's why I got into social media in the first place. And I felt like there are a lot of ways in which I couldn't be creative as a individual marketing service provider. And so when I started working with Jake on a couple projects, we weren't ever talking about going into business together. We just crossed paths a couple times. And the things that he was interested in and really good at were sort of a direct match to the things I was not interested in and was less good at. And so we started working together, and at the beginning of 2022, we realized we were doing so much work together that it made sense for us to formalize our partnership and to go into business together. Yeah. And one of our clients, actually our very first client together, is an independent baseball league. And the commissioner of that league has a background in law. He's a lawyer by trade and also the commissioner of an independent baseball league. And I remember him warning us, for lack of a better term, about the idea that going into business together is like getting married to somebody. Like, you have to have a deep personal understanding about this person, where they want to live, when they want to retire, how many kids they want to have, who else they might want to get married to, how much money they want to make. Like, these are things that are really important to know about your business partner, because the idea is that you build something that is so valuable together that if there is any misunderstanding or falling out, like, you just don't want that to get ugly, right? Yeah. Like, you never want to get to that point. But of course, you're both co-stewards of this thing that's really hopefully valuable. And and worthwhile, both in a monetary and a sort of like a existential sense to both of you. So
Right.
it was important to get to know that person, Jake being that
For
person for
sure.
me. And so I remember at the time, like kind of laughing it off and being like, dude, I'm 22 years old. Like, it's not that serious, like
Yeah.
it's not, but now I look back at it and it is that serious. I mean, we have a really significant business. We employ 7 people full time. Like, this is like
Wow.
people's lives we're talking. This is this is the thing that we could maybe retire doing. Like, I don't know. I don't know how long we're going to do it for, but this is meaningful. Like, I just got married. I hope to start a family. Like, these are things that are going to impact.
Congratulations.
Thank you. These are things that are going to impact my wife's life, my wife's life, my future kids' life. So it's like it is important, and I only realize that now through retrospect. But I mean, I love talking about Jake as much as I can, because when people ask me how I was able to manage, so I started doing the agency, and Jake and I started working together before I ever started content creation.
Sure.
I started content creation probably a year and a half into working full time out of college, and what Jake enabled me to do was to focus on the things that I wanted to do and not have to worry about anything else. Like, he was the ultimate snowplow, just getting everything out of my way that I wasn't interested in doing. And when I started creating content and expressed interest in doing that, much like a supportive parent might do, he said, okay, let's help you focus on that and get everything else off your plate. And it just so happened that we were ready to hire our first employee around the time that my own content was taking off. And so I was never put in a position where I had to think about balancing my day job at the agency and the content creation thing, because the second that the content creation thing seemed viable, and we're still talking less than 10,000 followers, but you could kind of see the trajectory. He was like, all right, if you want to do this, you go do it, and I'll take everything else off your plate. And so we hired somebody, and day-to-day client work got taken off my plate. And then we hired some more people, and more client work got taken off my plate, to the point that after a year, I was freed up to do as much or as little content creation as I wanted to. And, I was really liking it. So I was just doing more and more and more of it. And now, I'm still involved with the agency, and I'm still, I still talk with all those guys, and I still work with them in some capacity, but I'm a content creator. I'm ostensibly a full-time content creator. And that was only enabled through the fact that Jake never made me pick. He never made me have to feel like I had to balance anything. I'm actually a horrible person to give advice to people who are trying to start content and also trying to balance a full-time job, because that was never a binary I had to choose between. And it's all thanks to Jake.
Yeah, that's amazing. You said something very interesting in the beginning of that. You didn't want to be a freelancer. That's exactly what you are.
Well, in a way, I mean, I do think back to misconceptions. I remember doing the freelance thing and doing it pretty successfully my first year. And people are like, wow, that's so cool. You work for yourself. And I'm like, I have more bosses than you have. Like, when you work and you have
that's so
called
true.
a dozen clients, there are 12 people that think they deserve and own all of your time. And it's not a good answer to turn to them and say, well, actually, I have 11 other people just like you I have to service. That's not an appropriate answer.
Sure.
And so you have to give the time and attention and effort to call it 12 people equally. And you have to answer to those 12 people like they're your boss, because they are the ones cutting your check, just like a boss would. And so, there are just parts of that I didn't like. Like, I remember people would call me at 8 p.m. when I'm trying to hang out with my friends, and I had to answer those calls. And there'd be times where I had to, I don't know, like, hire people or fire people that I was working with on a project, or, worry about invoicing people and follow up with on invoices to make sure I was getting paid. Like, there's just mundane parts of that.
Yeah.
And when I thought about what I wanted to do, it was being creative. And I took a quote from Casey Neistat really literally, really early on. And he described that when you work in a creative field, there's not necessarily a clear linear progression. So you could go work at a corporate office and get promoted every year and get a raise and get a title change. But when you work in a creative field, when you're a freelancer, there's no real clear linear progression. Sure, there's like making more money, but it can all be kind of nebulous. And so the way he described it, how he felt like he was making progress in his creative career, was doing more of the stuff he wanted to do and less of the stuff he didn't want to do. And looking back on a 1 week, 1 month, 1 year time scale and thinking, am I doing more of the stuff I want to do? Am I less of the stuff I didn't want to do as compared to a year ago? And so
that's a very interesting perspective.
When I thought about what that meant for me, it meant taking as much of the stuff off my plate that I didn't want to do.
Yeah,
And when Jake and I started working together and I realized he was a guy that could do that, it made a lot of sense that we'd go into business together. And my idea of what it meant to be a creative and be a freelancer changed from I want to do this alone and I like working alone to like, oh, there are a lot of benefits in my own career journey to not having to go through this alone.
totally. It's always better to do things with someone than on your own. I've always loved the advice. I forget who gave it to me, but I I dish this out to a bunch of other people too. It's like, you know, when you're in college, look to the people next to you. They're going to be the ones working with you in the future. Or they could be hiring you. They could be going into business with you, like, how you said
Yeah.
with Jake. Speaking of college, what made you become a biology major? That
You
seems
went
like
back.
so out of left field.
You went back in the archive. So okay, I like talking about this because back to the point of me being a devil's advocate
Yeah.
as a young child. I
Like,
think
where'd
part of
biology
where
come into the mix?
yeah, I think part of where being like wanting to be the smarmy, like, well, actually, kid in high school is a desire to feel better than your peers. I mean, to put it simply, like you want to feel like you're the smartest person in the room. And so
Yeah.
that's why you're constantly challenging people on things, even when you're just doing it for the sake of provoking, because you want to remind people like, hey, I'm smarter than you. And when I think
Yeah.
back about my entitled, privileged young self, like that was exactly what I was doing it for. And
That's
so
amazing.
when I put myself back in high school like that, when I looked around and I was, taking these AP classes with other people and, doing all of like comparing ACT scores, like, I was like a smart kid. I wasn't the smartest kid. I was
Sure.
a really good, I was one of those like good at school kids where it was like,
Yeah.
I could try hard and get good grades and that sort of thing. And so I tested well and whatever. And when I looked at other kids that were like that for me, they all wanted to have some sort of really prestigious degree and they wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And so I remember looking around and thinking like, well, if that's what those kids want to do that are just as smart, if not smarter than me, then that's what I should do. Not because I was interested in it. In fact, when I take stock of the things that I was doing in my free time back in high school, it was running that Twitter account. And I was like like I was spending late nights creating content and like on phone calls with the other people I was running the account with. And like,
Yeah.
that's how I was actually spending my free time. But because I wanted to be associated with this like smart crew that were doing aspirational things, I thought, well, I should be a doctor because I like the way it sounded. Like I like the thought of me being a doctor as a way to once again elevate myself above my peers for nothing
Yeah.
else other than my own ego. And so that's what I did. And I think there are issues with how we make kids apply to college. And like, I was
agree.
17 years old applying to the University of Minnesota, having to declare in that moment that I was applying for the School of Biology. So at 17, I was setting my career path for if I would have stuck with it, what would have been the next 10 plus years of schooling.
Right. Oh my God.
And then I got
yeah.
to school and I realized, hey, dipshit, there are a lot of really smart kids. And these really smart kids are actually struggling in biology 101 and they want to be doctors. Like they have some sort of additional altruistic desire to do this. And you're only here for serving yourself and serving your ego, really. And so I
Right.
realized quickly that like when I wasn't the smartest kid in the room or didn't think I was the smartest kid in the room, and also I didn't really have the motivation or determination to be there, that it was going to be really hard for me to continue. And so it really made me take stock of what I was actually interested in and
Yeah.
what didn't sound cool, but how was I spending my free time? I wasn't spending my free time reading, I don't know, scientific research findings and science magazines. I was spending my free time running these accounts. I had stumbled into freelance work around that time. I was really interested in like growing on social media and growing audiences on social media. And that was that led me in a really clear way to then major in marketing and entrepreneurship, which
A little bit more
which I ended up doing.
intentional there.
A little bit more intentional, but it took me sort of having that realization of like, one, you don't have to be the smartest kid in the room. You're certainly not the smartest kid in the room. Maybe try to find something that you're actually a little bit more passionate about and not something
right.
that just sounds cool on paper.
Yeah, for sure. Man, if everybody took that advice, I think the world would be a lot more happier.
Yeah, I could not imagine a world which was comprised of 18-year-old Tyler Webbs. That would be a really bad world, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I could say the same for myself. I mean, 18 or we'll go back to 16-year-old Dylan. He thought he was going to run track in high school.
Sure.
Yeah, that wasn't happening with the 212 800 time, and a, over 20-minute 5K. That's not happening.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good to have dreams, but it's good to be realistic too.
Yeah, and then you blow your ankles out, and your athletic career's over. I'm part of the former athlete that gets injured and then turns journalist pipeline.
Okay.
That's my pipeline that I'm a part
Sure.
of. Yeah. So Tyler, the last question I do ask everybody is, just you as a person, like professionalism aside, like your content, your channel aside, like just you as a person. Tyler Webb, what is something you like most or admire about yourself?
I like most or admire about myself. I've really come to appreciate how I've channeled my curiosity. I think it's this one takeaway I have from this conversation. It's that my curiosity as a child came from an inauthentic place, or a self-serving place rather.
Okay.
And I think now I've been able to channel that just through having experiences in the world and having perspective in the world. I mean, God, Dylan, I thought I knew it all when I was 17, 18 years old. And looking back, like,
Didn't we all?
how could I have possibly thought that? Like, I lived in the bubble of all bubbles, and I had no life experience, and yet I thought I knew it all. Like, it's so embarrassing. It's truly, truly embarrassing to think about. But I do think it's important to have that arc, and to have that like self-growth arc. And I think it's led me to a place where I'm still curious. Like, there was always curiosity in me, but it now comes from a much more authentic place. I think it comes from a much more empathetic place.
Totally.
I think it comes from a much more productive place. Like, not all good curiosity is good, but not all like questioning of authority or fact is good. I mean, if we've learned that in our world today, like there are some questions that are pointless and maybe harmful. Like there's some dialogue that is maybe pointless and harmful. And so I think the way I've been able to channel that curiosity in a way that I hope is more productive for myself and the people around me is something I'm really proud of.
I love that, man. May we all continue to channel our curiosity in the right way and for the right reasons. Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Dylan. This is great.